It's easy to have ideas. It's very hard to turn an idea into a successful product. There are a lot of steps in between it.
Everyone knows Jeff Bezos is one of the richest people on Earth. His success story with Amazon is a tale that will be told for generations to come. But given the staggering odds placed against him by the competition, critics, and uncertainties surrounding the dawn of the internet, Bezos' billion-dollar dream should have been just that, a dream. To turn that idea into reality, he must have seen a bigger picture that no one could ever imagine, a path that no one had ever tread before. Make no mistake, Jeff Bezos came from humble beginnings. Born to 17-year-old Jacqueline in Albuquerque, New Mexico, his mother was still a student and took Bezos along with her to evening classes as a baby. His father, Ted, was a 19-year-old guy just running a bike shop in the city. It is not exactly how you would imagine the start of a future billionaire, right? Well, it does get a lot worse. His parents soon got divorced, with his mother eventually marrying a man named Miguel Mike Bezos in 1968. Yep, that's where the famous Bezos last name came from. Mike adopted Jeff and changed his last name to Bezos. Now, before you jump to any conclusions, Jeff's parents weren't exactly rich. Granted, his grandfather owned a ranch in Texas, but there still wasn't any inclination that Jeff would clinch generational wealth some few decades into the future. During the summers, Jeff often visited the farm and wanted to work hard and assist his grandparents. But it's safe to say that he wanted more. And in this case, a dream seemed way too big. As a matter of fact, David Meltzer once asked if he had enough faith to invest in Amazon almost 30 years ago. And this is what he had to say.
If I met Jeff Bezos 25 years ago, and he told me, Dave, I want you to invest in my company. What are you doing? I'm going to start a bookstore in my garage. Okay. And I'm going to put it online. People buy online, and I'm going to ship out of my garage. But if you invest in me, Dave, someday I'm going to be the richest man in the world. I'll do over $100 billion. First of all, there was no such thing as $100 billion 25 years ago. Statistically, there's no such thing. Countries didn't have 100. Our national debt wasn't $100 billion. And this dude's telling me at 26 years old that he's going to be the richest man in the world because he has a garage and the internet?
It's easy to see why David Meltzer was so skeptical. Just as he said, at the time Bezos had his billion-dollar dream, the concept of one man making $100 billion was simply impossible. After all, no country or national debt had reached such astronomical magnitudes. And guess what? That wouldn't be the only time that Jeff Bezos would have been discouraged by an honest opinion from someone else. Long ago, he spoke to his boss about his dream, and he couldn't believe it. He basically thought it was a fool's errand for someone who already had a good job.
I had a brilliant boss I much admired. I went to my boss and told him I was going to start a company selling books on the internet. He took me on a long walk in Central Park, listened carefully to me, and finally said, "That sounds like a really good idea, but it would be an even better idea for someone who didn't already have a good job." Seen in that light, it really was a difficult choice.
However, that's precisely where Jeff stood out the most. Instead of being skeptical or dismissive, he believed in his dream. And more importantly, he believed that he could make it possible. To address this, take a look at another mind-blowing statement from Meltzer.
But in his mind, and you know why you know he thought it was possible? Is because even when he got to points of that business that were bigger than other people's business, he invested 99% of his money back into the business. He took on more debt. He constantly took on more debt. He invested in himself, kept investing in himself.
But the question is, why? If he had already gotten to the points where he gained success, as Dave said, already bigger than other people's companies, why did he keep reinvesting and taking on more debt? You might want to grab some snacks because this is where things get really interesting. Apart from the fact that Jeff Bezos truly believed in his chances to make unimaginable wealth from Amazon, he went every step of the way with a certain mental model down to the last detail. For the uninitiated, mental models are a way to think about the world. It is how we all respond to and make decisions about the things we encounter in our everyday lives. including the framework of our inner principles. Just before we discuss the model Jeff Bezos used, it is worth noting that while mental models can drastically increase your probability of success in any endeavor that you make, no single model is right for every person. In order to pick one, you have to truly understand what works best for you. You need to have an inner dialogue with yourself to understand how you view the world and things you hold dear. Furthermore, different models work best for different situations. In Jeff Bezos' case, the model he used to walk away from his well-paying job and start an online internet bookstore in 1994 is what we call the regret minimalization framework. Despite its simplicity, this approach spurred him to act on an idea that he had been contemplating for a while. You see, Bezos wasn't foolish. He knew his job was well paid, and that there was always a risk of failing at his shot being an entrepreneur. Battling the ifs, buts, and maybes, he employed a straightforward approach to pursue his business goals, simplifying a complex and life-changing decision and turning it into a more manageable choice. It basically made things easier. Guys, when it comes to establishing this regret minimalization method, the first thing you need to do is to ask yourself this burning question. In X number of years, will I regret not doing this? It is all about envisioning yourself in the future and reflecting on your decision. Bezos, for instance, considered his potential regrets at the age of 80, specifically questioning whether he would regret not attempting to start the company. A straightforward yes or no answer guided his clarity on the matter. Here's how Jeff Bezos put things into perspective.
And the framework I found, which made the decision incredibly easy, was what I called, which only a nerd would call, a regret minimization framework. So I wanted to project myself forward to age 80 and say, okay, now I'm looking back on my life. I want to have minimized the number of regrets I have. And you know, I knew that when I was 80, I was not going to regret having tried this. I was not going to regret having trying to participate in this thing called the internet that I thought was going to be a really big deal. I knew that if I failed, I wouldn't regret that. But I knew the one thing I might regret is not ever having tried. And I knew that that would haunt me every day.
Can you see how easy his decision became when he applied this mental framework? He knew that when he turned 80, the internet would still become a big deal, and that if his business model failed, he would still have been happy that he tried either way. The only thing he would have regretted was not pushing himself. The thought of never trying to be successful through Amazon would have haunted him, and to mitigate that, there was only one solution: leave his job and dedicate his all to entrepreneurship. Adding to the intrigue, did you know Jeff Bezos once disclosed in an interview that he perceived a 30% chance of success when he launched Amazon? Despite those staggering odds, he still followed through with his goals, highlighting the significance of the regret minimalization model in guiding his decision. While we absolutely love this mental framework for many reasons, the most important one is arguably the fact that it'll make you look beyond the current moment, transcending any fears or doubts you might be experiencing. Instead, you propel yourself into the future, evaluating things from that perspective. Applying this mental model will shift your decision-making process from the limitations of the present to the possibilities of the future. You may think it's a bit far-fetched, but by looking inward to analyze the potential regret of attempting and failing, and the potential regret of never trying, you will broaden your perspective and paint a bigger picture for yourself. Let's think about it this way, using a real-life practical example of Damien, our decision maker at a crossroads between two enticing job offers. First up, we have XYZ Corp, a nice firm that's offering him a tempting salary. However, there's a catch. It demands a substantial amount of overtime, potentially disrupting Damien's cherished work-life balance. On the flip side, there's another firm called Pear that's also offering him a good role with a slightly lower salary. Yet, it's a perfect match for his burning passions while promising him a more harmonious work-life equilibrium. Using the regret minimalization framework to guide him in deciding, he perfectly considers the future instead of looking just at the juicy immediate gains. By playing the long game, Damien leans towards Pear, prioritizing his personal fulfillment and overall well-being. When he gets old and retires, do you think he is going to regret his actions? Certainly not. Time and again, we're all put into a dilemma where we can't satisfy both options and have to sacrifice one for the other. Instead of worrying too much, make sure you take advantage of this amazing method. Moving on, have you ever felt lost and overwhelmed while trying to navigate your work life? If you do, have you also considered the fact that you're not passionate about it? Jeff Bezos always preaches about the importance of having a calling and maintaining a burning passion for it. As a matter of fact, here's a clip of him insisting it's the easiest way to be great.
A young person should find something that they're passionate about to do. And that's not going to surprise anyone. It's a clear thing to do. It's very hard. If you don't love your work, you're never going to be great at it.
No matter how you think about it, it's easy to see why he does have a solid point. There is a distinct difference between a job, a career, and a calling. When it comes to employment, a job is often seen as a means to an end, a daily task to earn a paycheck. The focus is primarily on meeting immediate needs, and individuals tend to view it as temporary or a necessary aspect of their lives. Moving beyond a job, careers involve a more intentional and long-term commitment to a specific field or profession. It encompasses a progression of roles, skill development, and the pursuit of higher positions. Alas, while a career can offer more fulfillment than a job, it may still lack a deeper sense of purpose for some. And that's where the concept of a calling comes in. It's the connection between work and personal fulfillment on a profound level. A calling involves work that aligns closely with one's passions, values, and sense of purpose. It goes beyond mere employment. It's a vocation that brings a deep sense of meaning and fulfillment. People with a calling often view their work as a vital part of their identity and contribution to the world. But why exactly does Jeff believe a call is superior? To start with, when your work feels like a calling, it transcends the routine of a daily job. It transforms your professional life into more than just a means of earning a living. It becomes an active contribution to something meaningful. And guess what? Loving your job goes beyond the mundane tasks. It involves a genuine connection to your work. This emotional investment often leads to a positive work environment, improved mental well-being, and a higher likelihood of long-term success. To put it simply, it leads to a more enriching and rewarding life overall. Choosing his calling over a well-paying job was yet another thing that Bezos considered. He knew he'd regret following the latter and that the memory would haunt him when he got old. With the way we see things, you've got two options. You can either choose a life of comfort or a life of service and adventure. But guess what? When you're old and retired, a life of service and adventure is something you'll likely be more proud of. Follow your passions, be original, don't let criticism hold you back, and trust your gut. Ultimately, be relentless and never give up. That's how Jeff Bezos was able to succeed. Moving on, we want you to take a look at this clip from Jeff Bezos' speech to the 2010 graduating class of Princeton University.
I got the idea to start Amazon 16 years ago. I came across the fact that web usage was growing at 2,300% per year. I had never seen or heard of anything that grew that fast. And the idea of building an online bookstore with millions of titles, something that simply couldn't exist in the physical world, was very exciting to me.
Back in the spring of 1994, Bezos discovered that web usage was growing at a staggering rate of 2,300% a year. To take advantage of this amazing opportunity, he and his then-wife, Mackenzie Scott, left their jobs to start Amazon, an online bookstore. With Bezos leading and Scott playing a crucial role in operations, handling finances, bookkeeping, and negotiating the company's initial freight contracts, they laid the foundation for this garage-run operation to experience exponential growth. But here's the thing. Did you know Bezos initially named his new company Cadabra, but later opted for Amazon, inspired by the Amazon River in South America? His choice was influenced by the strategic advantage of starting with the letter A in the alphabet. Back then, online listings were alphabetized, making a name beginning with A appear sooner in customer searches. Can you imagine that? He was always looking for a competitive edge, believing the competition wouldn't drown his firm. Even when he faced criticism from Fortune and Barron, Bezos maintained that the internet's growth would overtake competition from larger book retailers such as Borders and Barnes & Noble. He was so focused that even journalist Nellie Bowles from the New York Times described Bezos' public persona and personality as that of a brilliant but mysterious and cold-blooded corporate titan. Plus, he was super focused. In the 1990s, Bezos gained a reputation for driving Amazon forward relentlessly, sometimes at the cost of public charity and social welfare. Many even believe that he was nerdy and geeky, but that wasn't enough to discourage him. As a matter of fact, in the early 2010s, Bezos solidified his reputation for aggressive business practices, and his public image began to shift. It almost felt like he had undergone a personal transformation. He began adopting tailored clothing, engaging in weight training, adhering to a disciplined diet, and freely spending his money. This physical metamorphosis has often drawn parallels to the transformation of Amazon, leading to this being commonly referred to as the metonym of the company. One can go on and on about the amazing life of Jeff Bezos and how he managed to make his $100 billion dream a reality. But let's be real for a second here. He'd never be the insanely successful man he is today if he didn't apply his amazing mental framework and passionately follow his calling. He is the perfect description of the saying, "With a will, there's a way." That said, here's a thought-provoking question from Jeff Bezos himself. Open your minds and answer them in your hearts.
Tomorrow, in a very real sense, your life, the life you author from scratch on your own, begins. How will you use your gifts? What choices will you make? Will inertia be your guide, or will you follow your passions? Will you follow dogma, or will you be original? Will you choose a life of ease, or a life of service and adventure? Will you wilt under criticism, or will you follow your convictions? Will you bluff it out when you're wrong, or will you apologize? Will you guard your heart against rejection, or will you act when you fall in love? Will you play it safe, or will you be a little bit swashbuckling? When it's tough, will you give up, or will you be relentless?